Welcome back. The decision to suspend planned EU retaliatory tariffs came as part of a broader effort to ease the immediate escalation of the US-EU trade war and to open a window for negotiations. Here's a detailed breakdown of the development, its context, and its implications. On April 9, President Donald Trump had announced an aggressive tariff policy that had raised rates on a broad range of US imports. In a dramatic pivot, he imposed a 90-day pause on the increase of tariffs for most nations. Under his plan, imports from affected countries would only face a baseline 10% tariff rather than the harsher rates that were initially announced. Notably, this pause did not extend to all partners. For example, tariffs on Chinese goods were raised further to levels such as 125% in some cases, underscoring the strategic and sectoral differences in U.S. trade policy. Traders and global leaders widely viewed Trump's decision as an attempt to temper market volatility and to give time for trade negotiations. After days of drastic market swings and investor anxiety, many analysts noted that the pause might be seen as a signal that the administration was open to dialogue, even if it maintained a firm stance on safeguarding American economic interests. Prior to Trump's reversal, the European Union had finalized a package of retaliatory tariffs designed to target approximately €21 billion, $23 billion worth of U.S. goods. These measures set to hit sectors ranging from agricultural products to industrial goods such as steel and aluminum were approved by EU member states as a direct response to the U.S. tariffs on steel, aluminum, and certain auto components. Key points of the EU's initial plan included tariff levels and targets. The EU had agreed upon countermeasures at a rate of around 25% for certain products. The selection of goods was calibrated to apply economic pressure while attempting to avoid triggering further widespread economic harm. Implementation timeline. The planned measures were to be introduced in phased rounds, with some tariffs originally scheduled for mid-April. Following Trump's announcement of a 90-day pause, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen announced that the EU would suspend these planned counter-tariffs for the same period. The key elements of this decision were negotiation space. The suspension is intended to give negotiations a chance. Von der Leyen stressed that while EU member states had strongly supported the countermeasures, it was more prudent to delay their implementation in order to open a constructive dialogue with U.S. counterparts. Conditional suspension. The pause is temporary. In her statement, von der Leyen warned that should the negotiations not yield a satisfactory outcome, the EU's countermeasures would automatically be reinstated. Selective application. Similar to the U.S. tariff pause, which does not apply to all sectors. For instance, critical tariffs on steel, aluminum, and automobiles have remained. The EU's suspension applies to the new retaliatory tariffs that were in the pipeline, rather than undoing all existing measures. The move reflects a complex interplay of economic, political, and diplomatic considerations. Both Trump's administration and the EU are aware that an all-out trade war could inflict significant damage on their respective economies. The pause is seen as a cooling-off period designed to prevent further escalation and restore market confidence. Global financial markets had experienced significant volatility in response to the initial round of tariff announcements and subsequent U.S. policy reversals. By suspending the countermeasures, the EU contributed to a temporary stabilization, which many international investors welcome. The EU's decision to suspend its retaliatory tariffs was coupled with signals that it remains committed to dialogue. This step, along with recent initiatives by some EU members to diversify trade partnerships, for example, by engaging in talks with countries such as the United Arab Emirates, underlines the bloc's desire to recalibrate its external trade strategy, rather than continuing a tit-for-tat escalation. The EU carefully weighed the potential economic harm against the benefits of a negotiated settlement. By pausing the countermeasures, EU officials hope to minimize immediate adverse impacts on European businesses and consumers while awaiting progress in trade talks with the US. The 90-day pause is widely interpreted as a test period for future trade negotiations. It provides both sides with breathing room to resolve differences on contentious issues such as tariffs on steel and aluminum, auto trade, and more sector-specific disputes. The suspension has contributed to temporary relief in global financial markets. Positive market responses were seen in Europe and other regions, where investors felt reassured by the de-escalation of immediate tariff pressures. Both sides have made it clear that this is not a permanent policy reversal. In Trump's case, the pause comes with the caveat that if negotiations fail, harsher tariffs could be reimposed. Similarly, the EU statement makes it clear that its countermeasures will be activated if the negotiations do not produce meaningful results. Global trade considerations. The decision also has broader ramifications. A protracted trade dispute could affect global supply chains, trade volumes, and international economic stability. Thus, the pause is seen by many as a critical moment to either reset the bilateral trade relationship or brace for a more extended period of economic uncertainty. In summary, the EU's suspension of its retaliatory tariffs mirrors the US decision to pause increased tariffs and represents an effort to de-escalate tensions while keeping the door open for negotiations. Both sides appear to be taking a strategic pause in hopes that dialogue can replace confrontation, although the provisional nature of these measures means that the underlying trade issues remain in resolved. This is our comment on the EU's 90-day suspension of retaliatory tariffs on the United States. Please subscribe and leave a comment to share your thoughts.